Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's tutorial, I'll be sharing with you how to draft out the pattern for a bustier with a Queen Anne neckline. If this is what you're interested in learning, please keep on watching, and if you're yet to subscribe, please subscribe and let's get started. So as you can see on top of my table, I have my paper already folded into two, and this is going to be the folded part of our paper. Now, the measurements you are going to be needing are the shoulder measurements, the shoulder to the bust point, shoulder to the under bust, shoulder to the waistline. You're also going to be needing the circumference of all these measurements, okay? So first of all, what I'm going to do is from the top, I'm going to come down by 1 inch so that will be my starting point. Okay, so after I come down by 1 inch, I'm going to draw my line across. Now from this point, I'll be marking out the shoulder to the bust point. So shoulder to the bust point I'll be using is 10. Now the shoulder to the under bust, I'll be making use of 14. And then shoulder to the waist, I'll be making use of 18 inches. I have the shoulder line. This is the bust point. This is the under bust point, and then this is the waistline. Now, next thing I'm going to mark out is on this line, my shoulder divided by 2. I'll be having 7.5 inches, but now I'm going to mark 8 inches because we need half an inch for joining the armhole to the bustier blouse, okay? Now again, I'm going to place my tape on this point and then come down by 1 inch for the shoulder slope. And I will simply connect this into the shoulder line, okay? But before I connect, I'm going to mark out the neck width, which is, I'll be using 3.5 inches for my neck width, and then I'll connect these points together. Now from here, I'm going to place my tape on the shoulder slope, and then to get my chest line, I'm going to have to divide my bust circumference by 6 plus 1.5 inches. So once I do that, I'll be having 8 inches, and I'm going to mark. And then I'll use my ruler to connect like this. So on this shoulder line, I'm going to ensure that I have my shoulder divided by 2 plus half an inch so that it will enable me connect this point into a straight line. Now I will label this the chest line. Now after this, next I'm going to come to the armhole depth, and I'll divide what I have in between the shoulder slope and the chest line into 2. So I'll place my tape on it and divide into 2 like this, and I will mark. And now from this point, I'm going to come in by half an inch. Now after this, what I'm going to do next is go ahead and on the chest line, I'm going to divide my bust circumference by 4, and I'll mark. So my bust circumference is 40. I'm going to divide it by 4, and I'll be having 10. I'll mark it out, and then I'll connect this and this together. Now after this, what I'm going to do next is come to this point, okay, to the bust point line, and I'm going to divide my nipple to nipple measurement by 2, okay? So I'll be making use of nipple to nipple measurements of 8 inches. So when I divide it by 2, I'm going to be having 4, but then I'm going to be adding half an inch for allowance, okay? So I'm going to, on the bust point, mark 4.5 inches. On the under bust point, I'm going to mark 4.5 inches, and then on the waistline, I'm going to mark 4.5 inches. Now I'm going to connect this point and this point together. But before I do that, I'm going to come down by 0.75 inches. Okay, this is just to eliminate any form of pointiness around the bust area. All right, so I'm going to connect the points like this, and what I'm going to do next is, on the waistline, I'm going to take in my dart. Okay, so I'll be making use of 2.5 inches, but then I'm going to share it on both sides. Okay, so on the side front, I'm going to input 1.5 inches, and on the center front, I'm going to use 1 inch. Okay, the same thing goes to the under bust. On this side, I'm going to use 1.5 inches, and on this point, I'm going to use 1 inch. So let's go ahead and mark it out. Now I'll come to this point and I'll mark 1.5 inches, and then I'll come here and mark 1 inch. Okay, I will also come to this point, mark 1.5 inches, and then on this side I'll mark 1 inch. Now you guys, this is not standard. It all depends on the client's measurement and actually how you want to tighten the waist. Okay, so this depends on whatever you want to use. Go ahead and make use of that. So I'm going to connect my lines just like this, and what I'm going to do next is, on the shoulder line, I'm going to divide the shoulder line into two. So remember that the shoulder starts from here, the neckline stops here, and the shoulder starts from this particular point. Okay, down to this point. So I'm going to place my tape and divide it into two equal halves. So I'm going to mark, and then I would connect this to the bust point line. Now after this, I'm going to come over to this point and use my curve ruler and then connect just like this. And then I will equally come over to this side, use my curve ruler and connect. Now when you are connecting, you are going to ensure that you don't have any sharp curve. Okay, so do well to curve your lines properly well. All right, now once I'm done with this, what I'm going to do next is check what I have in between the bust point and the under bust point. Okay, because we want to move that to the over bust. So what I have is 4 inches. Now I'm going to place my tape here and mark out 4 inches upward, just like this. Now what I'm going to do next is go ahead and mark out the neck depth. Okay, so I'm going to place my tape on this point and then mark down to 9 inches. You can as well make use of 10 inches. That is if you want your cleavage to show. Okay, but then I want to bring my own up a little so that my cleavage won't be showing that much. Okay, so I want it to be on the chest line, as you can see. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and from this point, I'm going to connect to this point and then to this point. Okay, so I'm going to use my curve to do that. Now next thing I'm going to do now is to tighten the over bust to avoid any form of gaping, because if you don't do that, here might gape. Okay, as soon as you connect your queen and neckline. So now what I'm going to do is to use 2 inches to do that, and to do that I'm going to share it equally on both sides. Okay, now this is how I'm going to do that. On this point, I'm going to go over to the side front and mark out 1 inch, and then coming over to the center front, I'm going to mark 1 inch. Okay, Now what I'm going to do next is use my curve to connect to the bust point and then connect also this to the bust point. Now you guys, you can see what we have. Okay, now once I'm done with this, next is for me to replace these 2 inches on the chest line, because if you don't do that, you might run short of fabric. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is go ahead and replace this on the chest line and then add up my 2 inches for seam allowance. Okay, now I'll come over to this point and I'll divide my under bust circumference by 4. Now replace the dart and then add 2 inches for sewing allowance. Okay, so my under bust circumference divided by 4, I'll be having 9.5 inches. So what I'm going to do is mark out this 9.5 inches. Now I'll be replacing these 2.5 inches that I took out for that, and then plus 2 inches for sewing allowance. I'll come over to the waistline. I'll repeat the same thing. Waist circumference divided by 4. I will input 9.75 and then replace 2.5 inches for that intake and then 2 inches for sewing allowance. Now I'm going to go ahead and connect this and this together. Once you are done with this, we are going to have to mark out our Queen Anne's neckline. Okay, now for the Queen Anne's neckline, we are going to connect from here into this point. Okay, you can either connect using your straight curve just like this. Can you see what I have there? Or you can slightly curve it using your curved ruler, but I want mine to be in a straight line, so I'm going to leave mine like this. Okay, once I'm done with this, next step I'm going to take is come over to the bust point and I'm going to input my bust dart. Okay, now this bust dart is the difference between the front and the back. Okay, now the difference between our front and the back is 2 inches. The front length is 18 inches. This means that the back length is going to be 16 inches. I hope you understand. So from the bust point, I'm going to come down by 2 inches and I'm going to connect it to this point. Next thing I want to do is go ahead and add up my 1/2 inch shoulder allowance. And then I'm going to connect the points together. And then extend this line. So guys, as you can see, let's go ahead and cut. Now, to cut this out, I'm going to first of all open up the waist dart so that we can close up the bust dart. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to open up this center and then open up the bust dart and then close it up. So you can see what I have. I'm going to use my tape to close it now. So you can see what I have. Now I'm going to continue cutting out. Okay, now guys, before I cut this off, okay, I'm going to extend this particular dart on this side front. Okay, now because if you don't do that, you are going to run short of fabric when joining this together. Okay, because if I try closing this up, are you see, if I try closing this up, you can see that this line is not aligning with this. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is extend this line by 1 inch. After extending it, I'm going to go ahead and connect it back to the bust point, and then connect it back to the neck depth. So you can see this is going to be my new neck, and then I'll be ruling out this particular line. Okay, so this is what it should look like. Now we are going to move over to the back. The back is very simple, just normal basic bodies for the back. So let's move over to the back. So guys, here is our paper for the back. You can see I've marked out the zipper allowance. So from the folded part of my paper, I went in by 2 inches, and this is going to be the zipper allowance. Now everything I'm going to be drafting out will be starting after the zipper allowance. Okay, now from the top of my paper, I came down by 1 inch, which is the shoulder line, and from this shoulder line I would place my tape and mark down to 10 inch for the bust point, and then 16 inches for the waistline. Remember, the difference between the front length and the back length is 2 inches. Okay, so the front length is 18 inches and the back length is 16 inches. Now first thing I'm going to do is place my tape just after the zipper allowance, and then I'm going to divide the shoulder by 2. Okay, so my shoulder is 15 inches divided by 2, just like the front. I'm going to mark 8 inches. Okay, including the half an inch seam allowance for the armhole. Okay, now on this point again, I'm going to come down by 1 inch for the shoulder slope, and then from this shoulder slope point I'm going to come down by 8 inches, which is my bust divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches for the chest line. Okay, and then I'm going to label it my chest line. Now I'm going to ensure that on this chest line I have my shoulder divided by 2, so that I'll be able to connect these points together. Okay, so I've marked out the 8 inches, and then I would connect my armhole depth. Okay, now I'm going to come over to the shoulder again, and then I'll be marking out the neck width 3.5 inches, just like the front. And now for the depth, I'm going to make use of 1 inch for the back. Okay, so I'm going to use my ruler and connect. Now I'm going to connect into the shoulder slope, and then divide what I have on my armhole depth into 2, and then mark it out. Now after that, I'm going to leave it that way, and on the bust point line I'm going to divide my bust circumference, and then I would mark it out on the chest line, and then equally mark it out on the bust point. So I'll be marking 10 inches because my bust circumference divided by 4 is 10. Okay, I'll go over to the waistline and then divide my waist circumference by 4, and I'll be marking out 9.75 inches. Okay, now I will leave it this way, and then first of all connect my armhole. And then connect these points together. Now once I'm done with this, next step is for me to divide the nipple to nipple measurement by 2. Okay, like we did in front. What we used was 4.5 inches, so I'm going to equally use that for the back. I'm going to mark 4.5 inches on the bust point and then 4.5 inches on the waist line. Okay, and I'm going to connect these 2 points together. Now after that, I'll mark out my waist dart. Okay, now for the waist dart, I'm going to be marking 1 inch on the side back and then 1 inch on the center back. Okay, and I'm going to connect it into the bust point. Now after that, I'm going to replace my waist dart on the waistline and then equally input the 2 inches for sewing allowance. Okay, now I'll come over to the chest line and input 2 inches for sewing allowance as well, and then I'll connect these 2 points together. So guys, as you can see, this is it for the back. We don't have much for the back, except if you want to like add up a shoulder dart, or you want to leave it this way. Okay, so for mine, I'm going to leave it this way, but if you want to add up shoulder dart for the back, what you want to do is go ahead and divide your shoulder into 2. So whatever you have, mark it out and then connect to the bust point. Okay, now next thing I want to do is input my shoulder sewing allowance, 1/2 inch, and after that I'll connect into a straight line. And you guys, yeah, that is it for the back. Okay, so you can see we are done with this particular one, so let's go ahead and cut it out. After this, we want to tighten the waist of the zipper. Okay, to avoid any form of bulging around the waist. So what I'm going to do is, on this line, I'm going to go in by 1 inch and then connect it to the neck like this. Okay, and that is just it. So what I'm going to do next is go ahead and from this point, I'm going to mark out 2 inches for my zipper allowance. Okay, and then I'm going to connect back to the neck. And then I will simply cut it out. So guys, you can see that is it for the back, and as well we have the front. So let me set it so that you guys can see what we have. Okay, so you can see we have the front and we have the back. So this is how to cut out your bustier with queen Anne neckline. I hope you guys find this video helpful. If you do, Please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't done yet, and also turn on your post notification to get notified once I upload a new video. I will see you guys in my next tutorial.